And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be in the village again. We are going to be trying to figure out who's werewolves and who's villagers, but that's not it. The end of the game isn't when we just figure out who everybody is. We're actually trying to protect or kill the people that are in the village by inquisiting them. So we're going to be looking at the Ultimate Werewolf Inquisition from Bezier Games, the same people that brought you many of the different werewolf games that are out there today. This version is for 3 to 12 players, wide range there, 30 to 60 minutes it takes to play. It says 8 and up. Let's take a look. I'll show you how it's played, and I'll see you on the other side. At the beginning of the game, everyone's given an identity card, and they will know whether they're a werewolf or a villager, and they keep this information hidden from everybody else for the rest of the game. And depending on the number of players, you'll see how many villagers or werewolves there are. Someone is randomly given the Grand Inquisitor pawn, which will allow them to break ties and votes in the future. And at the beginning of the game, assuming there's at least 2 werewolves, everyone's going to close their eyes and the werewolves will get to see each other, and the villagers won't know anything. And then everyone is given 2 black vote cubes. Here are the boards set up. Essentially, we have 12 rolls here that are face down, of course, and then the corresponding rolls of these 12 people are also here. This is sort of their hut, if you will. And then here we have the pile of votes. The object of the game is, if you're a werewolf, you want to have more werewolves alive in the village. These are all people that are living in the village and that we're going to be inquisiting about. And so at the end of the game, if there's more werewolves than villagers, because these are going to be getting killed off one at a time, they win. If you're a villager, you're trying to kill off all 4 werewolves. So out of all these cards, there's 4 werewolves. That's sort of what you're trying to do during the game. So let's talk about how a turn works. So here are the 12 huts that correspond with the 12 face down cards that are in the village. Each one of these has an action. So starting with the person who has the Grand Inquisitor token, they will essentially select one of these huts and then either do the stated action on the card or just simply take the card out of the village and take 2 votes for later on. Let's take a look at some of these do. So if someone took the Seer card, they can view any one of those cards by themselves and see it. So they would remove this from the village and they would do that action. So they would take any card here that they want that's basically vertical like this, and they would take it and they would look at it, keep it secret as to who it is, and then they would turn it just to show you this is, let's say, a sorcerer. Nobody would know that but the person looked at it, and after they've looked at it, they put it horizontal so everybody knows that that card has been looked at. Now at this point, people might be saying, hey, is that person good or bad? Do we want them killed or don't we? And some discussions will go on, and depending on who saw that, whether the actual person who was a werewolf or a villager, it will change depending on their strategy. So obviously, since this was a sorcerer, if it was a werewolf, they probably want this person killed. If it's not a werewolf, they probably don't. And then you got to figure out who to trust. Let's say the next person picks the apprentice here. They pay 1 vote. Remember, you start with 2 of them, and then view a vertical card. So they would remove this, and they would do that action. So they'd pay that vote. They'd look at this card secretly, and let's just show the viewers it is a villager, and then it would get turned sideways because it was looked at, and then again some conversations would happen about who that was. Should we kill him? Should we not? Now I've been going order, but once the next person's turn, anybody can take any one of these cards. They don't have to go in any order. And let's say they choose the sorcerer. Now the sorcerer's ability is pretty cool. She's most of the time people cannot look at any of the horizontal cards. She can. She views any horizontal card, which means someone's already looked at it, and then they take 2 votes from the pile and place it on the one that they've looked at. And they would remove this and they would take that action. Of course, at any time, instead of taking the action, you can always take two votes as well. So after some interesting conversations, the sorcerer looks at this card and is either happy or mad that they had to put 2 votes on that. Because at the end of this round, whoever has the most votes in the day phase is going to die. And let's say the next player takes the mayor, who gets to give the Grand Inquisitor token to any player. They can give it to themselves. So they can take it or give it to someone else depending on who they know is a werewolf or not at the time. This is actually interesting and gets better towards the end of the game. And let's say the next person takes the Mason card and they're going to pay 2 votes to view a vertical card. And then they're going to remove this hut. They pay their 2 votes to the pile. And let's say they view this. And ooh, no one else would know who this is, but that person would know it's a hunter, and it would go sideways because it was looked at, and then some more interesting conversations would go on. Let's say there's 3 more players that are playing the game. Now the hunter says take 3 votes and then place all 3 on a vertical card. Now since we don't know what any of these vertical cards are yet, it's a little bit of a gamble, but let's say he just puts them there. Later in the rounds when you have some more information and people are sharing things about what they've seen, that may make more sense. And let's say someone takes the witch, which is move all votes from one vertical to another vertical, and this would get removed. So maybe someone takes all these and moves them over there. And let's say the last player takes a villager/werewolf card, and they take 2 and place 1. So they're going to take 2 votes and place 1 on somebody, then this would go out of the way. And let's say they place 1 there, and it's 3 votes to 3 votes. So one at a time, starting with the person who now has the Grand Inquisitor. This is the day phase still. Everyone that has at least 1 vote has to vote in order from the Grand Inquisitor around, and they will place 1 vote on a card, 1 at a time. So once everybody has voted, it might look something like this. The person who has the most votes automatically dies. In this case, these 2 are actually tied, so the Grand Inquisitor will break the tie. Depending who that is and what they believe and what people have said, they would choose one person. And let's say they choose this person. All the votes come off, this person gets flipped over, and the seer has died, unfortunately. So both the seer and her corresponding hut get taken, and they're completely out of the game for good. Now we move on to the night phase. So in the night phase, whoever owns the Grand Inquisitor token can select any row that has at least 2, any column that has at least 2 cards in it. So right now all of them are illegal. They're going to take all these cards from one column and they're going to stack them and they're going to remove all the votes from them. So let's say they take this column. They're going to remove all the votes from this column and they're going to keep them in order. Top, middle, bottom. Then we're going to move on and tell you what happens with these cards. So starting with the Grand Inquisitor, everyone's going to close their eyes. And if you are a villager, or you're on the villager team, essentially you're just going to make some noise, but you're not going to change the order or do anything. And then you're going to simply just pass them to the next person. You'll kind of tap them, they'll open their eyes, you give it to them, you both close your eyes and then do what you do. So the villagers are always keeping their eyes closed and they're not changing the order. When the werewolf gets this card, they can look at them and they can choose which person to kill. Ooh, the apprentice here is probably the most powerful. They put that one on the bottom. Now it's on the bottom, and they would pass it to the next person. So when it gets all the way around to the Grand Inquisitor, so the werewolves are the only ones that are seeing these cards, or actually even doing anything actually with them, then the Grand Inquisitor will get the cards back, everyone will open their eyes, and then we'll place them back in their column. So in order, it's going to go top, middle, bottom, because they're the same orders that was given to the Grand Inquisitor at the end. The bottom card flips over and they are killed. So in the night phase, the werewolves have all the power because they can pretty much kill whoever they want that's in that column. And depending on, if the Grand Inquisitor is one of the werewolves and they have some information, they can pretty much try to get the people they want killed. So we removed the apprentice seer and the seer hut away, completely out of the game. Now, if you ever have 2 columns of just 1 card, those would combine. But see, as we did now, already 2 cards are gone, and pretty much 2 are going to be getting removed most of the rounds. And so we're missing 2 cards, or we're missing 2 cards, and that's a whole day and night phase. So this day and night phase will continue, and all these cards will, they'll start to die off round after round. People are going to be getting killed, and we're going to be getting less cards, and after the next card, we're going to see some less cards, and it's going to be getting down to the nitty-gritty. We're going to have less and less people until it gets down, and again, the game ends when either all 4 werewolves are killed, or if there's more villagers than werewolves. And so that's how you play Werewolf Inquisition. Now I just showed you 12 of the cards that's recommended for a beginner game, but there's some other roles that you can mix in that I didn't show you, like the cursed role, for example. And the cursed role's action is they take 4 votes, and then if this action was taken that day, and during the night phase, if the one that was killed is the cursed, they go back into the column, and the cursed person is now a werewolf for the end of the game, and it essentially will give them another werewolf. The wolf cub, essentially take 4, and then again, if the wolf cub's action is hut's taken that round during the day, at night, if the wolf is the one that's killed, they do yet another killing, a second nighttime killing right away. The troublemaker, they pay 1 to shuffle a row or a column of any of the cards. They take the votes off them and keep them sort of in the spots they are. They shuffle them, they put cards back, and they put the votes back on the stations that they're at. The bodyguard, they can replace any vote on a vertical card with the bodyguard. They actually put this card over it, and then that person cannot get killed that day. The minion, they take and place 2 votes, and they put it on anybody that already has a vote on it. And the prince can take 4 votes. Now you can mix and match any of the rules that are in the game. For instance, what they tell you is each card has a plus or minus value. Plus is easier for the village team, minus is easier for the werewolf team. And when you set up the 12 cards, you just want to make sure that it's as close to 0 as possible, which will balance the game out. All right, well, there's Ultimate Werewolf Inquisition. Yes, I know what you're saying. Another werewolf game. Come on. Okay, well, here's what I think. It is different enough from all the other werewolf games I've played that it's okay. It's its own standalone game because it's quite different. Obviously, it's similar enough to Werewolf and One Night Werewolf and things like that, but it's still yet different enough to keep it on its own. So what did I really like about this? One cool thing is, sure, it's a social deduction game. But most of those games that I like the Resistance Avalon and One Night Ultimate Werewolf and Mayday Mayday and things like that, they tend to play better with larger groups. And this one plays as little as 3, and it actually works really well with 3, which I'm really impressed with. That's what I really like the most about this is I now have a game in my collection that has some social deduction elements that I can play with a very small amount of people. And that's really, for me, the most appealing thing for this game. Sure, it does play better and maybe even, I wouldn't say better, it still plays very well with more players, but it still had the same feel. I was very surprised at how much it still felt like the real game with 3 as it did with 5, with 10, whatever. So that was probably the biggest selling point in this. Now, from a social deduction element, it's definitely on the other end of the spectrum from, say, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which is like all social deduction. It's just conversations and this and that. And this is totally different. I would say this is more of a gamer version of a social deduction game, where sure, the social deduction matters, and you are trying to figure out who's on the villager and who's on the werewolf team. But all in all, it doesn't really matter that much, because once they're outed, once you figure out who they are, once, at some point they're probably going to give themselves up to do something that's obviously a werewolf move. And there's a cool side of this, which is, hey, if they figure out who I am, it's not the end of the game. It just changes the game, which is cool, because the werewolves are trying to be sneaky, but then once they're outed, then they're really all about pushing the strategy in their direction. And it's very much more like a gamer, tactical card style, role selection, action selection type of game, more so than, say, the social deduction. And don't get me wrong, it has a lot of social deduction in it. You're trying to figure out who it is, you're trying to figure out who to believe. But towards halfway through the game or 3/4 through, I think most of the times that we've played, people kind of know who's who. And then it's very strategic, very tactical, trying to figure out what roles should we take, which ones should we try to take so that the werewolves won't have them, and vice versa. So it's definitely a more gamer-y, if that's even a word. Of course it's not, but I'm going to say it anyways. Gamer-y type of a game. It's more tactical. So it's a little more deeper of a game than most of the social deductions. So I probably wouldn't bring this out to just a party with people that don't play board games. I'd probably, for the social deduction, would probably still pull out One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I would still pull out Resistance Avalon before this. But if you have a good gamer group and you have a smaller group, this is a great way to play a social deduction game. And I think it gets better with more plays as you understand the strategies and such. So it's a good game. It's not my favorite social deduction game. The other ones I mentioned I like better, but it is good, and it does sort of stand on its own because it is quite unique. And it does scratch a similar itch with being different. So if you're looking for another social deductions experience, but yet something different, you want to check out Ultimate Werewolf Inquisition.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.